The boardroom felt like a morgue. Clark Thero sat at the head of the mahogany table, his Ivy League smile cold as winter. 2 lawyers flanked him like vultures. I'd walked in thinking this was about my quarterly review. Instead, I was staring at termination papers. "Ashley, you're brilliant," Clark said, sliding the documents toward me. "But we're restructuring to preserve capital. Your position is unsustainable." My throat went dry. After 6 years at Luminaris Systems, after building the software that powered half the country's energy grids, I was being fired. The woman who'd crawled out of Ohio poverty, earned my MIT degree on scholarships, and revolutionized clean energy, dismissed like yesterday's trash. "I don't understand," I said quietly. My voice sounded small in the massive room with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor. The same harbor I dreamed of seeing as a poor kid in Cleveland, imagining the day I'd make it big in tech. Clark's grin widened. "Don't take it personally. It's just business." Security was already at the door. They'd locked my accounts before I even walked in. As I packed my personal items into a cardboard box, my hands shook with rage and humiliation. The picture of my mother fell to the floor, glass cracking. But at the bottom of my desk drawer, wrapped in a manila folder, was something Clark had forgotten about. Something that would change everything. I sat in my car outside Luminaris headquarters, hands trembling as I opened the folder. Inside was a document I'd almost forgotten, a contract signed by Harold Cresson 2 years ago, just before he retired as CEO. Harold had been different from Clark. Fair, thoughtful. He'd recognize my genius when others saw just another engineer. The paper was titled, IP Ownership Agreement, A. Rennick. I scanned the legal language, my heart pounding. There it was, buried in the fine print, joint ownership of my grid optimization software. Harold had quietly given me co-creator rights, knowing how much of my soul I'd poured into that code. He'd pulled me aside one afternoon, speaking in hushed tones about protecting innovation and ensuring talented people weren't exploited. My phone buzzed, a termination of benefits email. But underneath it was something else, a system alert I'd forgotten to disable. It showed a deployment update with my name still tagged in the source code. The irony hit me like a sledgehammer. They'd just fired their golden goose. I stared at the screen, realization dawning. They'd fired me, but they were still using my invention. Every day. Making millions. The software that cut energy costs by 60% for entire cities, that was mine. And Clark had no idea I still owned half of it. His arrogant smile suddenly seemed less threatening and more pathetic. I spent the weekend diving into system logs from my home computer. My software wasn't just running. It was the backbone of everything Luminaris did. Modular, independent, still linked to my original Git repository. Every update, every deployment traced back to code I'd written in my spare time, using my own equipment. The timestamps told the whole story. 11 p.m. commits, weekend deployments, holiday bug fixes. All done from my apartment while Clark played golf. Clark thought he'd fired dead weight. He had no clue he'd just lost his golden goose. The man who'd never written a line of code in his life had dismissed the architect of his entire empire. My LinkedIn pinged with a notification. Clark was giving a keynote at the Global Grid Tech Summit next week. The title made my blood boil. Revolutionary Energy Solutions, How Luminaris is Changing the World. My work, my sleepless nights, my innovations, all packaged under his name like he'd invented electricity itself. I clicked the preview. There was Clark in his expensive suit, standing beside slides showcasing my algorithms, my optimization protocols, my innovation. He was going to take credit for 6 years of my life's work in front of industry leaders. I closed my laptop and smiled for the first time since Friday. Clark wanted to play dirty? Fine. But he'd picked the wrong poor girl from Ohio to mess with. I still had cards he didn't know existed. The live stream of Clark's speech made me sick. He strutted across the stage like a peacock, gesturing at charts that showed how his software had revolutionized municipal energy systems. The audience ate it up. Hundreds of tech executives applauding the genius of Clark Thero. Comments flooded the chat praising his visionary leadership and groundbreaking innovation. At Luminaris, we believe innovation comes from bold leadership, he said, basking in the spotlight. Our proprietary grid-opt system has saved cities billions while reducing carbon emissions by 40%. He paused for effect, letting the applause wash over him like he was accepting a Nobel Prize. My grid ops system. My algorithms. My sleepless nights debugging code while he golfed with investors. Every line of code he was claiming credit for had been written in my cramped apartment, fueled by instant coffee and the dream of making the world better. He clicked to the next slide, a map showing every city using the software. New York, Chicago, Los Angeles. Dozens of municipalities depending on technology I'd created. Technology that was making Luminaris hundreds of millions in revenue. The slide even included my original performance metrics, though my name had been scrubbed from every chart. Clark raised his arms like he'd just won the lottery. This is just the beginning. Next quarter, we're expanding to 50 more cities. I muted the stream and opened my email. A message from someone named Marcus Chen, subject line, urgent, Luminaris IP issue. My heart skipped. Marcus was an engineer I'd mentored. He was reaching out from inside the company. Marcus's message was brief but devastating. They've been scrubbing your name from the source code, but the audit trails still exist. Thought you should know. I called him immediately. His voice was shaky, nervous. Ashley, they're planning something big. Clark's team spent all weekend removing your contributor tags from the codebase, but they missed the Git history. Every commit still shows your authorship. He was whispering, probably hiding in a bathroom stall or empty conference room, my hands clenched into fists. They weren't just stealing credit, they were actively erasing me from my own creation. But they'd made a crucial mistake. You can't delete Git history without destroying the entire repository. Every timestamp, every code change, every innovation was permanently linked to my profile. 6 years of commits, thousands of lines of code, all bearing the digital signature of Ashley Rennick. There's more, Marcus whispered. They're rebranding the whole system next quarter. Calling it TheroGrid. Clark wants his name on everything. Marketing already designed new logos. TheroGrid. The audacity was breathtaking. Clark wasn't content with firing me. He wanted to claim my life's work as his own legacy. My software would bear his name while I collected unemployment benefits. I thanked Marcus and hung up. Then I opened a secure connection and began creating a private mirror of the entire codebase. Every file, every update, every piece of evidence that proved the software was mine. Clark thought he'd won. He had no idea the war was just beginning. The IP lawyer's office smelled like leather and old money. Patricia Hayes had handled tech patents for 30 years. She reviewed my documents with sharp eyes, occasionally nodding or making notes. The Herald Agreement, the Git history, the deployment records. This is airtight, she said finally. You own joint rights to the software. Luminaris never filed the proper override documentation. Legally, they can't use this technology without your consent. My heart raced. So what does that mean? It means you have leverage. Big leverage. Patricia leaned back in her chair. We could file an immediate cease and desist. Stop them cold. I shook my head. Not yet. I want something bigger than a court victory. Patricia's eyebrows rose. What did you have in mind? I thought about Clark's smug face, his stolen speech, the humiliation of being escorted out like a criminal. I want to sell my half to their biggest competitor. Patricia smiled slowly. Now that's interesting. There's a European firm called Ardentis Global that's been trying to break into the US market for years. Luminaris has blocked them at every turn. Set up a meeting, I said. Tell them I have something that could change everything. The email to Ardentis was simple. I have proprietary grid optimization code that cuts municipal energy costs by 60%. Your biggest competitor fired me last week. Interested in evening the score? Their response came within hours. We've been fighting Luminaris for 5 years. When can we talk? I stared at my laptop screen, finger hovering over the reply button. Once I sent this, there would be no going back. Clark had drawn first blood by firing me. Now it was time to show him what real warfare looked like. I typed back, tomorrow, Zurich, bring your lawyers. The funny thing about being underestimated your whole life is that people never see you coming. Clark thought he was dealing with some bitter ex-employee. He had no idea he'd just awakened a monster he'd helped create. My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. Benefits termination, final day. In 24 hours, I'd officially be unemployed. But if this meeting went well, I'd be something else entirely. rich enough to buy and sell Clark Thero 10 times over. Our dentist headquarters in Zurich looked like something from a sci-fi movie, all glass and steel reaching toward the Alps. The CTO, Dr. Elena Vasquez, met me in a conference room overlooking the city. Her team of engineers watched as I connected my laptop to their main screen. "Before we begin," I said, "I need you to understand something. This isn't just about technology, it's about justice." I launched into my demo. Real-time grid optimization, predictive algorithms that anticipated power surges before they happened, weather integration that adjusted citywide energy flow based on storm patterns. The room fell silent as my software danced across their monitors. "Mein Gott," whispered one of the German engineers. "This is 3 generations ahead of anything we've seen." Dr. Vasquez leaned forward. "This is what powers Luminaris? Their entire operation?" 80% of it, I confirmed. "And as of last Friday, they no longer have legal rights to use it." The room exploded in excited German and Spanish. Dr. Vasquez called for quiet. "What do you want from us?" I smiled. "Partnership, exclusive licensing, and enough money to make sure Clark Thero never forgets my name." Back in Boston, I walked into the USPTO office with a thick folder of documents. The patent clerk, a tired-looking woman named Janet, reviewed my application for joint IP ownership of GridOps software. "This is unusual," she said, scanning the Herald agreement. "Most companies don't allow split ownership like this." "The former CEO was a forward-thinking man," I replied. "He believed in protecting innovation." Janet stamped the papers. "Registration will be live in the database within 48 hours. I left the building feeling electric. My phone buzzed constantly, messages from former colleagues asking if the rumors were true. Had I really been fired? Was I okay? Did I need help finding a new job? I ignored them all and updated my LinkedIn profile. New headline: co-creator, GridOpt AI, founder, investor, strategist. Within minutes, my phone exploded. Comments poured in from industry contacts shocked by the news. But there was one view that mattered most: Clark Thero's. I could picture his face turning red as he realized his fired employee was claiming ownership of his company's core technology. My laptop chimed with an email from his legal team. The subject line made me laugh out loud. "Cease and desist, false IP claims." Clark's cease and desist letter was a masterpiece of legal intimidation. 3 pages of threats about fraudulent ownership claims and industrial espionage. His lawyers demanded I remove all references to GridOpt from my social media and cease spreading malicious falsehoods about Luminaris intellectual property. I forwarded it to Patricia, who called me back laughing. "They're panicking," she said. "This letter is all bluster, no substance. They can't prove fraud because there isn't any. Your ownership is legitimate." Patricia fired back with our own legal response. 22 pages of documentation proving my co-creator status. Git logs, deployment records, the Herald agreement, and USPTO registration certificates. The message was clear: try me. My phone rang at 11 p.m. Unknown number. "Ashley?" The voice was strained, desperate. "It's Clark. We need to talk." I almost hung up, then curiosity won. "What do you want, Clark?" "This is insane. You can't just claim ownership of company property. Herald had no right to sign that agreement. Herald was CEO, he had every right, and now it's public record." Silence. Then, "What do you want? Money? Your job back? Name your price." I smiled in the darkness of my apartment. "I want justice. You fired me to cut costs. Let's see what that really costs you." I hung up before he could respond. The Ardentis contract arrived by courier at 6 a.m. I spread the pages across my kitchen table, heart pounding as I read the terms. Exclusive 10-year licensing agreement for GridOpt technology. Upfront payment, $2.1 billion. After taxes and legal fees, I'd net about $1.6 billion. Overnight, I'd go from unemployed to one of the richest women in tech. I signed with a hands that barely trembled. My phone immediately buzzed with a secure message from Dr. Vasquez. "Welcome to the team. Deployment begins Monday in New York, Chicago, and Miami. Prepare for takeoff." By noon, my bank account showed a pending deposit that made me dizzy. But the real satisfaction came that afternoon when my Google alerts started pinging. News stories about major cities canceling their Luminaris contracts, municipal energy directors citing competitive alternatives and better pricing structures. Clark's empire was cracking, and the tremors were just beginning. I ordered Thai food and opened a bottle of champagne. For the first time in a week, I wasn't angry anymore. I was victorious. Clark's meltdown happened during Luminaris's quarterly board meeting. I heard about it from Marcus, who'd been taking meeting notes when Clark started screaming about industrial sabotage and corporate espionage. He threw his phone across the room, Marcus whispered over our encrypted chat. Said you'd stolen proprietary code and sold it to competitors. The board was not impressed. But Clark's rage was nothing compared to what happened next. CFO Janet Morrison stood up and read from a legal brief. We're facing 17 cease and desist orders. Boston, Seattle, Portland, and 14 other cities are suspending our contracts pending IP verification. The Luminaris stock price told the whole story. Down 19% in 48 hours. Financial blogs were calling it the fastest tech collapse since Theranos. I decided it was time to go public. My tweet was simple. Fired on Friday. Still own the code on Monday. Funny how that works. Know what you own. I attached a screenshot of the Git repository showing 6 years of commits under my username. Within hours, it had 50,000 retweets and 1 million views. The comments were brutal, tech workers sharing their own stories of corporate theft and executive arrogance. Clark tried to respond, but his PR team clearly stopped him. Smart move. The journalist's message came through LinkedIn. Rachel Kim, Wall Street Journal. Off the record, willing to share your side of the story? I agreed to meet at a coffee shop in Cambridge. Rachel was sharp, prepared, asking pointed questions about IP law and corporate governance. I showed her everything. The Herald Agreement, the Git history, Clark's panicked phone calls. This is a hell of a story, she said, scribbling notes. Tech giant fires creator of their core product. Creator sells rights to competitor. Tech giant collapses. It's David versus Goliath. More like David versus Goliath, where David owns the patent on slingshots, I replied. Rachel laughed. Can I quote that? The article ran 3 days later with the headline, The Code War, How One Fired Engineer Brought Down a billion-dollar Tech Giant. It went viral instantly. My phone didn't stop ringing for days. Interview requests, speaking opportunities, book deals. But the best part was Rachel's final paragraph. When asked if she regrets her actions, Rennick responds, Clark fired me to save money. I just showed him what that decision really cost. The leaked Slack messages hit Twitter like a bomb. Someone inside Luminaris had screenshot conversations from Clark's private channel with his executive team. The messages were devastating. That greedy bitch thinks she can hold us hostage with her code. Ashley was always too big for her britches. MIT diploma doesn't make you untouchable. We'll bury her in legal fees. She can't afford to fight us. The tech community erupted. Justice for Ashley started trending. Female engineers shared their own stories of workplace discrimination. Male allies called for boycotts of Luminaris products. Clark tried damage control with a company-wide email about maintaining professional discourse, but it was too late. Screenshots of his messages were everywhere. I responded with a single tweet. Character reveals itself under pressure. Thanks for showing yours, Clark. My mentions exploded with support. CEOs I'd never met offered job opportunities. Investors wanted to fund my next venture. Women's leadership organizations invited me to speak at conferences. But the sweetest message came from my old MIT professor. Always knew you'd change the world, Ashley. Just didn't expect it to be this dramatic. Clark's settlement offer arrived via certified mail. $100 million to resolve all disputes and maintain confidentiality about past employment matters. Essentially, he wanted to pay me to disappear quietly. I called Patricia immediately. It's not a bad offer, she said. Most people would take it. I'm not most people. I grew up with nothing, Patricia. Money isn't what this is about anymore. Then what is it about? I thought about every girl who'd been told she was too smart, too loud, too ambitious. Every woman passed over for promotion while less qualified men advanced. Every brilliant mind dismissed because they didn't fit the old boys club. It's about making sure this never happens to anyone else. I drafted a one-line response. Declined. See you in court. But I had one more move to make. Using a portion of my Ardentis money, I quietly purchased 5% of Luminaris stock, just enough to demand a board seat and access to executive meetings. Clark would learn there's a difference between firing someone and getting rid of them. The Luminaris boardroom felt different this time. I sat at the same mahogany table where Clark had ambushed me 6 weeks earlier, but now I was on the other side. Board members nodded respectfully as I took my seat. Clark's face was white as paper. "Ashley," said Board Chair Margaret Chen, "thank you for joining us. We understand you have concerns about IP management." I slid a thick folder across the table. This documents every instance where Luminaris knowingly used technology they didn't own. Dates, deployments, revenue figures, everything. The room fell silent as board members flipped through pages of evidence. Clark shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "The question," I continued, "isn't whether mistakes were made, it's whether this board will hold leadership accountable for those mistakes." Margaret exchanged glances with other board members. "We'll need to discuss this privately. Clark, perhaps you should." "This is ridiculous," Clark exploded. "She's trying to destroy the company out of spite." The room went dead quiet. Margaret's voice was ice cold. "Mr. Theroux, you're excused from the remainder of this meeting." Clark stormed out, slamming the door. I sat calmly as the board voted to suspend him pending a full investigation. "Would you consider returning as CEO?" Margaret asked hopefully. I smiled. "No, but I have a different proposal." The emergency injunction hit Luminaris like a tsunami. Federal court ordered them to immediately cease all deployments of grid-op technology pending resolution of the IP dispute. 80% of their revenue vanished overnight. I watched the chaos unfold from my apartment, monitoring news feeds and stock tickers. Luminaris shares dropped 60% in pre-market trading. Employees posted panicked messages on social media about layoffs and office closures. Cities that had relied on grid ops scrambled to find alternatives. Fortunately, our dentist was ready with my improved software, offering seamless transitions and better pricing. Municipal energy directors praised the innovative European solution that promised even greater efficiency than the old system. My phone rang constantly. Reporters wanting statements, lawyers demanding negotiations, investors offering partnerships. I ignored them all and focused on building something new. The incorporation papers for Woven Gridworks were filed that afternoon. My company, my rules, my vision for how technology should serve humanity, not just profit margins. Clark tried calling 17 times. I blocked his number after the 5th voicemail threatened to destroy me in court. The Glassdoor reviews told the real story of Luminaris's collapse. Current and former employees shared devastating accounts of mismanagement, nepotism, and toxic leadership culture. CEO blamed engineering team for his own IP theft. Watched talented colleagues get fired while incompetent executives got bonuses. Company culture died when Harold retired. New leadership only cares about stock price. The reviews painted Clark as an incompetent bully who'd inherited a successful company and driven it into the ground. Former directors revealed how he'd ignored engineering concerns, cut R&D budgets, and prioritized flashy marketing over actual innovation. My favorite review came from someone signing as former grid engineer. Ashley Rennick was the smartest person in every room. Management fired her because they felt threatened by actual talent. Now they're learning what happens when you mistake luck for skill. The tech press picked up the Glassdoor story, turning it into a broader conversation about leadership and accountability in Silicon Valley. Harvard Business School announced they'd be teaching a case study on the Luminaris collapse in their MBA ethics course. Clark tried to go on CNBC for damage control, but the interview was a disaster. When asked about my ownership claims, he stammered about disgruntled employees and frivolous lawsuits. The host politely destroyed him with basic questions about IP law. The Senate Commerce Committee hearing was televised nationally. Senator Elizabeth Warren grilled tech executives about worker exploitation and intellectual property theft. When my case came up, she held up a printed copy of my tweet. Ms. Rennick was fired on Friday and still owned the code on Monday. Warren said, "How is that possible if companies are properly managing intellectual property?" The panel of tech CEOs squirmed. Clark wasn't invited to testify, but his absence spoke volumes. Warren continued, "This case represents everything wrong with our current system. A working-class woman from Ohio creates revolutionary technology, gets fired to pad profit margins, then has to fight in court for credit for her own work." The clip went viral within hours. Tech justice trended on Twitter for 3 days. My mentions filled with messages from engineers, inventors, and entrepreneurs sharing their own stories of corporate theft. A venture capitalist tweeted, "The Ashley Rennick case should be required reading for every startup founder. Protect your IP or watch someone else get rich from your work." MIT announced they were creating the Rennick Fellowship for Women in Engineering. I cried when I read the press release. The shareholder lawsuit hit Clark personally. Investors accused him of gross negligence and fiduciary irresponsibility in the handling of Luminaris IP assets. The court froze his personal accounts pending discovery. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and pity watching him on the courthouse steps, surrounded by lawyers and reporters. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. The arrogant executive who'd fired me with such casual cruelty was gone, replaced by a desperate man fighting for his reputation. "This is a witch hunt," he told reporters. "Ashley Rennick is trying to destroy American innovation because she couldn't handle corporate restructuring." The reporters weren't buying it. One asked the question that made Clark's face go red. "Sir, if Ms. Rennick's ownership claims are false, why hasn't Luminaris provided evidence to contradict them?" Clark stalked away without answering. That evening, I announced Woven Gridworks had secured Series A funding. $500 million led by 3 of the most respected VCs in clean tech. Our mission statement was simple. Technology should serve humanity, not exploit it. Applications for engineering positions flooded in from around the world. Luminaris filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy on a gray Tuesday morning. The company that had once employed 3,000 people and powered dozens of cities reduced to a shell corporation selling assets to pay creditors. Their former headquarters went up for sale, a gleaming 50-story tower in downtown Boston that had symbolized tech industry success. I remembered walking through those halls as a young engineer, dreaming of changing the world through clean energy innovation. Clark was spotted by paparazzi being escorted out by security, carrying a cardboard box just like the one I'd packed 6 months earlier. The irony was perfect. I submitted a private bid for the building through my lawyer. Not out of spite, but because I had plans for that space. Big plans. The bankruptcy auction was scheduled for Friday. By Thursday, I was the sole bidder at $200 million, half the building's appraised value, but more than anyone else was willing to pay for a symbol of corporate failure. The keys were mine by week's end. Walking through the empty Luminaris headquarters felt surreal. My footsteps echoed in the marble lobby where I'd once swiped my badge every morning. The executive floors where Clark had humiliated me sat dark and abandoned. I took the elevator to the top floor, Clark's old office with its panoramic view of Boston Harbor. His nameplate was gone, but the furniture remained. I sat in his chair and called the interior designer. "I want it gutted," I said, looking out at the city skyline. "Everything, down to the steel beams. We're building something completely new." The renovation would take months, but I could already envision it. Open workspaces filled with brilliant women and underrepresented minorities. Labs where the next generation of clean energy innovators could dream without fear of exploitation. Meeting rooms where equity and collaboration replaced hierarchy and intimidation. The press release went out that afternoon. Tech entrepreneur Ashley Rennick announces the Rennick Institute for Relentless Invention. A reporter called it poetic justice. I called it a new beginning. The Rennick Institute launch event drew over 1,000 attendees. Scientists, entrepreneurs, activists, and investors packed the renovated lobby where a massive bronze plaque dominated the main wall. The inscription read, "For every girl told she was too loud, too smart, or too much, welcome home." I stood at the podium where Clark had once announced my firing, looking out at faces that reflected the diversity he'd never understood. Young women of color who'd been overlooked by traditional tech companies. Immigrants with brilliant ideas, but no connections. First-generation college students who reminded me of myself 20 years ago. "This institute exists because someone tried to erase me," I said. "They failed. But more importantly, they taught me that our greatest power isn't in what we build, it's in who we lift up along the way." The applause was thunderous. Reporters called it the most inspiring speech in tech industry history. Later, at the reception, Dr. Vasquez from Ardentis raised her champagne glass. To Ashley Rennick, who proved that justice delayed is not justice denied. I smiled, thinking about that scared girl from Ohio who'd once dreamed of changing the world. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning, subject line, a favor. I almost deleted it before seeing the sender, Clark Theroux. The message was brief and pathetic. Ashley, I know you have no reason to help me, but I'm desperate. Legal fees wiped out my savings. My reputation is destroyed. No one will hire me. I was wrong to fire you. You were the best engineer we had. Is there any chance you'd consider giving me a position at your institute? I've learned from my mistakes. I stared at the screen for a long time. The man who'd humiliated me, stolen credit for my work, and tried to erase my contributions was begging for charity. Part of me felt vindicated. Another part felt sad for him. I didn't reply to the email. Instead, I had my assistant send a package to his address. A hardcover copy of my new book, Build, Don't Steal, Lessons in Tech Ethics and Innovation. Inside the front cover, I'd written, "Success isn't about taking credit, it's about giving it where it's due. Good luck finding your path." It was the last communication we'd ever have. The cemetery was quiet, except for wind rustling through oak trees. I knelt beside my mother's headstone, placing fresh flowers on the grave. Sarah Rennick had died when I was 25, never seeing me graduate from MIT or build my first algorithm. "You always said they'd try to take what I built," I whispered. "But I held the line, Mom. Just like you taught me." The inscription on her headstone read, "She believed in tomorrow." Simple words that captured everything about the woman who'd worked 3 jobs to keep me in school, who'd saved quarters in a jar so I could buy programming books, who'd hugged me tight the day I left for MIT and whispered, "Show them what a girl from Ohio can do." Behind me, construction crews were putting finishing touches on the Institute's newest wing, a research center for sustainable energy innovation. 50 of the brightest minds in clean tech would work there, developing solutions for climate change and energy poverty. I stood up, brushing dirt from my knees, and walked toward my car. Tomorrow, I'd be announcing our partnership with MIT to create full scholarships for first-generation college students studying engineering. Next month, we'd break ground on institutes in Detroit and Phoenix, bringing opportunity to communities that had been forgotten by the tech industry. The bronze plaque by the parking lot caught the afternoon sun. Rennick Institute for Relentless Invention. Below it, in smaller letters, "For every girl told she was too loud, too smart, or too much, welcome home." I smiled, thinking about Clark's empty office and his frozen bank accounts. He'd fired me to cut costs. Turns out the real cost was everything.